Um, in Jordan today, people took to the streets to celebrate. Where they handed out candy and did a type of celebration that's common in the Middle East. Was it because the Jordanian football team won some major tournament? Was it because the Jordanian people managed to overthrow their dictator? No, it was because a Jordanian citizen managed to murder three people in Israel. There was a terrorist attack in the Allenby Bridge, which is the crossing between Jordan and the West Bank, where Israel controls that border, that border crossing, not so much that border. So yeah, a truck driver drove his truck across the border and then got out and started shooting at people, killing three before he was neutralized. Um, and this, oddly enough, on Friday, I messaged Daniel on our Slack channel for the Daily Objective, telling him that today's topic for the Daily Objective will be uh, uh, something, I don't remember the exact title, but something along the lines of Israel's Philadelphia corridor of the East. The We've talked about the Philadelphia corridor on this channel recently. Netanyahu has made it a point in his negotiation, a point which we agree with, in a negotiation which we disagree with, that Israel cannot leave that border between Gaza and Egypt because that is the border through which terrorists, weapons, and money flows in to Gaza to Hamas. But yeah, not much is spoken about the 309-kilometer border between Jordan and Israel slash the West Bank. And there is no doubt that a lot of bad stuff and people flows between that border and the Israeli side. Um, Yeah, welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by James Valliant. James, your initial thoughts on what happened today and on the border in general.
There's another sad, horrific day when innocent people are killed by some Islamic monster fanatic. But, my initial impression here too is exactly yours. I mean, how does Israel do it? I mean, they're surrounded by enemies on all sides. If you think about it, they've got the border to the south to worry about, the border with Lebanon in the north to worry about, and of course, this, as you point out, this very long border with Jordan, if you include the West Bank, Judah and Samaria. Because that's what the West Bank is, ladies and gentlemen, traditionally called Judah and Samaria, at least most of it. So that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about an important trade crossing, the General Allenby King Hussein crossing. It's used quite a bit for cargo and to bring people who work on the other side of the border in. And so it's an active trade border. And you're telling me that, again, the weapons and terrorists can't flow back and forth between the bad guys in the West Bank? Because look at everything here. South of that river in Lebanon, you got Hezbollah in control. At the Gaza Strip, you've got Hamas, well, partially in control, but Israel's actively operating there. But then look at the giant borders you point out with the West Bank. Israel is completely surrounded by enemies. It is astonishing to me that they even have viable security. They must be the most badass military on this planet to be able to defend when they're completely surrounded by enemies. And people complain about naval blockades of the Gaza Strip or something, or they complain if it's border crossing, if the Allenby King Hussein border crossing gets closed or something. Oh, they'll scream bloody murder, and it's Israel's fault. Don't worry. No, the Islamists kill innocent civilians, and of course they'll work it out so that it's Israel's fault or something. Uh, but it's astonishing to me that Israel can even maintain its survival when it's obviously surrounded by such overtly terroristically hostile people. But you're telling me that weapons and terrorists don't go back and forth with in the West Bank? No, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be realistic about that. It too is a source for Iranian weapons and supplies and terrorists. You better believe that's also true. You know, the West Bank is very much like Gaza. And when peace was Israel achieved some sort of peace with Egypt. Egypt said, no, y'all keep Gaza. We don't want it. Jordan was very similar when it came to Judah and Samaria. No, you all can keep the West Bank. We don't want it part of the Kingdom of Jordan anymore because it's a huge headache. But on the other hand, Jordan is using the West Bank, just like Egypt is using Gaza, as a thorn in Israel's side. So don't be mistaken about the real intentions of whether it's, a dictatorship over in Egypt, the Cairo dictatorship, or this ancient monarchy from the family of Muhammad that rules in Jordan. No, 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 ladies and gentlemen, it's all the same ideology, and you can see it playing out in its bloody consequences just now.
Yeah, we often hear, and we hear this from pro-Israel people in Israel, that Jordan is majority Palestinian. The majority of the population there is Palestinian. I don't know if this is true. I still haven't figured out what exactly the definition of a Palestinian is. Yeah, that does depend on that, whether or not this statistic is true. But yeah, this is definitely something to keep in mind, both when deciding how to deal with this border and when assessing, and people in Israel should assess the peace deal. There is peace between Israel and Jordan. This was signed in I believe 1994, right after the Oslo Accords, and Jordan was Israel's second neighbor that Israel had signed a peace deal with after Egypt. And we spoke about Egypt a couple of days ago. It's important to realize, you can sign treaties and you can make statements and so on, but Israel has only enemies in the Middle East. And it's important for Israel to realize that, because it refuses to realize that. It refuses to realize that even when it comes to Gaza and the West Bank. But it thinks that if it has a treaty with Jordan, that means Jordan is some sort of an ally or a friend. No, Jordan is an enemy of Israel. And if Israel, again, when Israel refuses to realize who its enemies are, it pays with the lives of its citizens and the lives of its soldiers. It refused to do that before October 7th. It refused to do that since October 7th. And many hundreds of soldiers have died in Gaza. It refuses to do this when it comes to Lebanon. This is also not major news around the world, but there were over 50 rockets fired today at Kiryat Shmona in the north of Israel, a
I
town. I'm
heard
not sure.
more of these missiles coming from the north. Will it
Yeah,
never end?
and then Israel, sometimes bombs if they can, the like specific people firing the rockets, but they refuse to acknowledge that they're at
Wipe out
war.
Hezbollah or take on the real enemy. My God, if Israel and America can't even name the real enemy, much less pussyfoot around so they can avoid escalation with Hezbollah or Iran, we've lost it, ladies and gentlemen. We've lost it. That cannot be the attitude. And frankly, we've got to turn the screws on the King of Jordan now too. Frankly, look at what just happened. No, ladies and gentlemen, these are not friends of Israel. They're active enemies of Israel, happy to disrupt and that's what this is all about. It's the long game for the destruction of Israel that they're in on. They know it's not a short game. They know Israel's got a powerful military, and to some extent, at least America's behind them. So they're not going to do it all at once. But they're in for the long game, for the utter destruction of Israel, meaning, ladies and gentlemen, the death of 7 to 8 million Jews in Israel. That's really their long goal here. Do not think it is otherwise.
Thanks, Adam, for becoming a member of the YouTube channel. There's a comment here that I want to read, mostly because when trolls write in complete paragraphs, that's always important and unusual and worthy of comment. So,
Headline
of
news.
course, we still don't name trolls. This is a person who doesn't like what we say and has something different to say. I'm gonna read it in their words, and then I'm gonna try to decipher it. Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. In 1948, the Palestinians were driven off their land and put into concentration camps. You are living on their land. What do you think would happen? I'll start from the end. James, in case you didn't know, San Diego is Palestinian land, as is London. We're living on their land. Yeah, 1948. the Zionist movement was happy to accept the UN partition plan, which created another Arab state because there weren't enough of them at the time, and clearly there aren't enough of them now, alongside Israel. Israel declared its independence. The next day, the Arab world united to start a war against Israel, a war which the rest of the world was watching, assuming that Israel's days are numbered. Unfortunately for the savages, they lost, and Israel continued to exist. And yeah, some of them ended up running away, which you sometimes do when you start a war and then lose it. So yeah, and just to decipher the part about Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. Make no mistake about it. When somebody says something like that in the chat, what they mean is going to a music festival and raping women there, burning people alive, shooting kids in the head in their own homes in the kibbutzim in the area. All of that is what they call armed resistance, and they call legitimate. So when you hear about Israel killing women and children, and again, women and children undoubtedly die because terrorists like to hide behind them in Gaza and Israel. Sometimes bombs from the air, not enough, but sometimes it bombs from the air so that its soldiers, fewer of its soldiers die. Uh, yeah, that's when they care about women and children, but they don't care about women and children. What they care about is the destruction and elimination of the state of Israel and the extermination of the Jews. This is what the pro-Hamas side is for, and don't let them fool you with fancy sounding ways of putting it, like armed resistance, and they're oppressed and they're in concentration camps. Yeah, most of the people from 1948 are no longer with us, but their children and grandchildren and so on and so forth for all eternity will be considered refugees who are victims of the fact that their ancestors lost a war. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. James.
Only a racist would have opposed the creation of Israel in the first place. Only an enemy of civilization would have opposed the creation of Israel in the first place. Armed resistance? No, it is the one place where there is any civilization in the area. Do you say a right to armed resistance? No, these people are advocating the kind of monarchies and dictatorships and Islamic republics that you see in the area. These people are tyrants. They do not have a right to armed resistance. The government they would set up would be a dictatorship of one of these sorts. And Israel is the only government around who's actually enforcing anybody's rights, my friend. And your history is simply all mythology. Concentration camps, driven off. No, that is the propaganda, sir. No, civilized Arab Muslims. I know that's quite a lot to ask and put all in one sentence, but civilized Arab Muslims would welcome the existence of Israel, the peace, prosperity, economic and technological development, the trade with the world. No, oh, well, but that's not the goal of Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, is it? Or Hezbollah, is it? It's the destruction of Israel and the creation of either a dictatorship or a caliphate that supports Islam. So you got it all backwards, my friend. Liberty and justice are on the side of Israel.
Yeah. By the way, this person continues and says a lot of crap that I kind of want to respond to, but I'm not going to. From one scumbag to others. Let's go back to an issue that has been now. Whenever I watch the news from Israel, I hear this conversation about, are we in a third intifada? And I remember similar conversations in Israel, in Israeli public discourse from the second intifada. People weren't sure yet, because there was a terrorist attack today. There was another terrorist attack last week that killed three people. There are many, many attempts at terrorist attacks that aren't successful. So yeah, this is the question that arises in Israeli media. And look, we might be in a third intifada. We might be just about to enter a third intifada. The Palestinians certainly have gotten moral support from the world for what they did on October 7th by the fact that while many in the world, condemned the attacks, they then condemned any attempt by Israel to prevent future attacks. So the Palestinians have have been told, look, this works, this is good, keep doing it, and the world will stand with you. Uh, but my message to Israel would be, assume it's a third intifada or that it's coming. Look at the previous two. Look at how you acted in response to the previous two intifadas. Is there any lesson there? After the first intifada, Israel went to the Madrid conference and then signed the Oslo Accords, uh, brought Palestinian terrorists who were in exile to the West Bank and Gaza, gave them land that was under their control, thinking that they would prevent terrorism. Instead, they encouraged it, and more terrorism happened. The second intifada was again, Israel offered everything to Yasser Arafat, and he said, no, I choose war instead. Israel did some military actions there, which again, in which it sacrificed soldiers so that Palestinian civilians might live, and got condemned around the world, and then did the disengagement plan, leaving Gaza, and got 2 decades of rockets and October 7th. Maybe try something different this time. Maybe try saying there is an enemy that we should defeat militarily, and until it is defeated, we are at war, and therefore we should defeat that enemy as soon and as decisively as possible. We should take a lesson. Israeli leaders said after October 7th, we are fighting an enemy that's like the Nazis. That's a correct statement. Look at how the Nazis were fought and were defeated. Take a lesson from that. And I know they're not going to listen to me, but this is as much as I can do is advocate for it.
Yeah, they are every bit as evil in their intentions, ideology, and if they don't have the mighty power of the German war machine, that's the only difference. And look at the way they've been doing these intifadas. I mean, yes, okay, there's back. You would have thought, okay, there's if we bomb buses. See, now they're going to mix up their strategy. No, we'll do October 7th. That makes better sense. See, they mix up their strategies and using hospitals and schools, using children as human shields, that really works, and it's probably more, PR effective than bombing civilians and Israeli buses. So they're thinking savvy. They're moving up their strategy. They're creatively, trying to do it. So there's going to be differences and similarities between this and the Intifada we last endured, where innocent where bus drivers themselves had to get special security training because buses with innocent civilians were getting bombed on it. That might not work for PR purposes, but do we want the same kind of thing? Oh, look at the intentions haven't changed at all. They're willing to kill children in front of their mothers. They're willing to rape people at a concert. So no, their savage intentions haven't changed one little bit. They'd be happy to kill innocent civilians, even in more horrific ways. They're just mixing it up for PR purposes. Yet Israel can't take your advice, rethink their current strategy, and hey, how about just once? If you really do believe that these are like the Nazis, because they are, then why don't you treat it that way?
Yeah. All right, James. I tried, but there is another comment by this troll that I absolutely have to read.
Okay.
My apologies in advance. The Lancet Medical Journal reported 2 months ago that it is likely 186,000 Palestinians will likely be killed in this war on the Palestinians. So welcome to the Ayn Rand Center UK, troll. Please look through our content. We have this show 7 days a week. We have another show on weekdays. You can watch it tomorrow. But scroll back. We talked about that bullshit article in the Lancet. We tore it to pieces. We talked about it on both of these shows, one after the other. Yeah, somebody said something bad about the Jews is not news and it's not fact, but well done for. I sometimes wonder, James, with these people, and this guy again writes in full, almost grammatically correct sentences. How how does somebody with this level of critical thinking tie their shoes?
It
Uh,
is the sanction of a journal with the reputation of the Lancet. You see, it's the Lancet that gives, or like the UN says, the UN, as if that's some kind of authority that we should defer to. No, ladies and gentlemen, the UN and the Lancet got their information from murderous liars, and their statistics cannot be true. They are simply ridiculous, absurd. They pull them out of the air or someplace else, and I tell you, you can't believe it. And don't believe it simply because it appears in a prestigious medical journal like Lancet. It is absolute nonsense, factually impossible, and based on information you're getting from murderous liars.
Sorry, I was reading super chats. Let me read them out loud. Thank you, Bull Moose, for the super chat. Bull Moose says, "Why doesn't anyone tell our allies that whenever they tell us we have the right to self-defense and determination, they're lying to our faces? They don't need to be told. They know that." By the way, I have to say, I often say to people when people say, talk about, us talking in hindsight and so on, I encourage people to go back to the episodes we did on October 7th, on October 8th, on October 9th. Tell me what we didn't predict almost exactly. Now, the one thing that I kind of fell for was the such strong rhetoric from Joe Biden, from Antony Blinken. Antony Blinken gave this beautiful speech saying, Israel can defend itself alone if it has to, but as long as the U.S. exists, it won't have to. And that lasted until Israel started taking military action, and then the U.S. shifted its allegiance to Hamas. So, yeah,
Thoroughly. No,
look,
I myself was never, you recalled me back in October of last year. I at first was hesitant about criticizing Netanyahu. After all, this poor man is dealing with poor man. I don't like, I would not use that language right now, but at the moment of stress, when you're dealing with in the wake of October 7th, I was hesitant. I did not feel that same sort of hesitancy when it came to the regime in Washington, D.C., my own government. Though Biden and Blinken, I admit their initial statements were pretty dang good. I admit that. I could already hear the cracks. I could already hear the qualifications and the slippery, pragmatist, unprincipled, anti conceptual, moral relativist, altruist ideas that dominate, I'm afraid, the politics and culture in my country. I could hear the just the beginning, early tinkles of the beginning of the melting of that snow, and you could hear the water beginning to come. Israel, America has not really got your back. They really have, and by now, it's just as Razi says. They're pro Hamas. They want a ceasefire in the wake of the execution of hostages. I mean, nothing could be more perverse. Washington, D.C. is hostile to your interests, Israel. Take this chance where there's confusion in American leadership to do what it takes. And do not bow to pressure, even from the U.S. administration, who I know is the closest thing you've got to an ally. But ignore us. Do what you must. Wipe these monsters out.
yeah, and I'll get to the other super chats. I want to get to the last one first because it's Bull Moose following up. Thank you for the additional super chat. Bull Moose says, I mean, more like calling them out on it. I completely agree. It shocks me every time that Israel won't even do, diplomatically, won't even do the PR that is so easy to do. Objectivists aren't fans of the of arguing that somebody is a hypocrite because you're basically saying, okay, they have the right principles, they're just not acting by them. I take some issue with that because I think you could challenge somebody on not acting on their principles without saying those are the right principles. But with this is going to be so easy with the UK saying, look, we are just copying what you did against the Nazis. Now, Israel isn't copying what they did against the Nazis. They bombed the Nazis into oblivion. They bombed German cities into oblivion. They didn't say, let's go door by door and see if people voted for the Nazi party or that wasn't the thing. They bombed cities, and they should have. And that's what Israel should do. And then yeah, Israel should. But look, if Israel doesn't have the moral courage to do what's right militarily, why would it have the moral courage to take that stand even just verbally? So Yeah, I
That's
agree
it,
with
by the
you.
logic.
We do that on this channel, but unfortunately, we're not spokespeople for the government of Israel. We couldn't be because we're not in
Alas,
agreement.
yes, alas, no. But you know something, there is a strange contradiction. Sometimes you'll hear Netanyahu speak in moral language that makes sense, but then there's no follow up in the real action. I mean, if what he said is really true, then we wait a minute here. We should be fighting to armed to the teeth, fighting to the end, and destroying the enemies. It's there's a difference between the rhetoric, especially, and I know we've commented on this before. There's a difference between the rhetoric, and it sounds so good sometimes, especially the English. I don't know Hebrew at all, but the English version of Netanyahu's speech can often sound good. Well, you're making a moral point, but then where is it in action? If you really believe that, Prime Minister, follow through. You know, this is a clear moral case. I know the world is against you. I know the world is irrational. I know the world is hostile, but don't play the game of international politics, even with the idiots in DC.
James, after 11 months of talking about this, you should know Hebrew by now. But anyway, okay, there's a few. I, again, I'm reading this troll's comments because he's saying to somebody in our chat, "Go back to Europe. That is Israeli land." Now, this, of course, is anti-Semitic. Now, I'm going to go back to that argument that objectivists don't like. In that arguing that this is hypocrisy, but hypocrisy, hypocritically not following bad principles. You shouldn't follow the principles, but you're not following them. Do you do this across the board? Do you go up to Arabs in the UK and in Europe and say go back to Arabia? Do you go to black people and say go back to Africa? Do you go to white people and say go back to Africa? I mean, depending how far back you want to go, that would
I
also
guess my
be.
answer is they should go back to England, Scotland, and Ireland, right? I mean, okay, you know, we've been occupying North America for centuries now, and it's about time we end that. I mean,
But
that's
by the way,
exactly
that they will say,
that they will
but they
say.
won't say that about about minorities. I think in the West as
But
eagerly as
think
they would
about it.
about. Yeah.
Think about it. Okay, I've heard this. Jews go back to Poland. Jews go back to Europe or Russia or wherever where they mostly came from. Okay, what was going on there? How well were Jews treated there for centuries by the Christian majority surrounding them? They were murdered, abused, ghettoized. I mean, it climaxed in the Holocaust less than a century ago, in which millions of innocent Jewish civilians were rounded up, tortured, and killed. I mean, my God, you're saying go back to the land where they suffered a genocide within living memory? I mean, think about that, dude. Now, hypocrisy. Now, some people, like altruists, of course, it's not much of an argument. No one can live up to altruism. It's impossible to live by. That is the point to make here, because they're not bothered in a sense by yeah, I know no one can be perfect. Theory can never match practice. Practice can never match theory. Yes, I understand. That's just the inevitable fate of the world. Well, we disagree with that. That's true. But pointing out hypocrisy can show that they have no viable, workable ideas. And insofar as you use hypocrisy in that sense, yes, ladies and gentlemen, if I walked up to an Indian in London and I said, go back to India, everyone would see immediately that I was a racist. What, you speak Hindi? You're a Hindu? Well, go back to India. You don't belong here in Great Britain. That would be the rank racism that we just heard there from that winner.
Yeah. By the way, ask people in Israel if they speak Polish. Let's see how many. Yeah. But
And
again, it doesn't matter. That's this is pure
you
anti-Semitism.
know, a lot of Jews came from Arab states, by the way, and you know how nicely they were.
Most Jews, I believe that most people in Israel right now, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe most actually are descendants of people from Arab countries. Again, most people were born in Israel. They didn't come from anywhere. But
But if your ancestors came from Egypt or Syria or Yemen or something, you know, those places were just swell places to be Jewish. You know, gosh, go back there to where you were again. I mean, whether it's a Christian majority country or a Muslim majority country, have Jews been fared very well in recent centuries? No. That's why we need a Jewish state, ladies and gentlemen, because murderous hostility, like you saw on October 7th, still occurs.
I just want to quickly say there's a few comments here I also want to address, but I want to quickly say there was a video with James Valliant and Dr. Peacock that was supposed to premiere. Now it's been postponed, but it's going to be on the channel in a couple of days. It's very good. It's over an hour long. I promise you it'll be worth the wait. So yeah, for people tuning in now or waiting for that video, it's you'll have to wait a couple of days more. Mike says trolls should have to pay to get read. There is something to that. But when we read troll comments, it's usually because either they're making points that are so popular with the other side that it's important to and Israel doesn't answer those points. And most Israeli spokespeople or most pro-Israel people out there don't answer those points. So we do want to answer that, and sometimes they're just ridiculous, and it's nice to have some comedy mixed in between the generally not very funny stuff that we talk about on this channel. But I will say we do occasionally have whole segments on the reality show Extra, which usually streams at this time on this channel, which is members only. And then we, yeah, and so most trolls comments are behind a paywall. It's a $5 paywall, but I'm pretty sure that's a wall high enough to keep those trolls out. And last point, we don't read their names ever. All right, now to the people who have paid. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Jonathan, for another super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for another super chat. Super chat. Congrats to James creating JC creating Christ. Is that what you're meaning? He said it's doing great. Top of the Amazon charts.
It's true. The sales of Creating Christ have spiked unusually. I mean, they've been doing well for several years now, but they've spiked. And you know, the documentary, which I never expected to be made, hundreds of thousands, over 500,000 people from by certain estimates have viewed that documentary. So thank you, Jonathan. I'm forever astonished at how well that book is doing and the reaction it's getting.
And Enric says Palestinian is a term the PLO created. Palestine is just a region named by Romans when they destroyed ancient Israel. Yes, that's true. Now, I don't care really if people want to call themselves Palestinians. I mean, the problem, and I consider it mostly a political ideology because, again, it is not really clear. It seems that the policy on who is a Palestinian is as many people as we can call Palestinians in our effort to get rid of Israel. And yes, the Palestine Liberation Organization was created, I believe, in 1964, and not sure about that, but around that time, and yeah, and yeah, that is where the Palestinian movement came from. That is how the Palestinian people were invented. But look, it's not the fact that they claim to be a nation that is the problem here. It is Western acceptance of altruism, and Enric also said in the chat something that, yeah, he said the UN declarations on Palestine are pushed by totalitarian states. That's true, but the problem isn't that they're pushed by totalitarian states. It's that they're accepted by free countries.
It's
We're the problem. We
It's
in the
Britain
West
and
are the
the United
problem here.
States that are the problem. Exactly correct. Much worse problem, don't you think? Is the sanction that more civilized countries give it? It's the sanction that Britain and the United States give it that's far worse, in my view. Yes, you said it exactly correct.
Well, that's all I had. Anything? Any parting thoughts, James? I could see if there's anything else in the chat that's
No, no, ladies and gentlemen, but you are getting a point of view here in the Ayn Rand Center UK that you're not going to get anywhere else, ladies and gentlemen. We are the ones with the moral clarity on this issue, and until and unless something approaching what we're suggesting takes place, uh, I'm afraid the survival of Israel is very much in doubt in my mind. Indeed, the survival of civilization itself in the long run. So please consider becoming a paid member and subscriber to Ayn Rand Center UK. We're doing very important work, and it's a voice you won't hear anywhere else.
There was a comment, I can't find it now, but somebody asked if we're going to do a episode about YouTube's censorship policy. So briefly, we'll say YouTube doesn't censor. YouTube is a private platform. Yeah, it's somebody's property. If you want to come into my living room and wave a PLO flag, I will kick you out, and that's not censorship. That's me choosing how I want to how what I want to do with my own property. We can think that YouTube should have a different policy, and you can also create an alternative to YouTube and put them out of business. So yeah, again,
Now,
we
do I always like the attitudes of Musk over at X or Zuckerberg over at Facebook or the folks that run YouTube? No, but it's their private property. They get to have an editorial filter and control on it. That is not censorship, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when you see a government agency or government official threatening some outlet, that might be. But as such, social media cannot censor. They're private organizations. They can't censor any more than Rozzy is censoring you if he kicks out some PLO monster from his living room. No, people learn what censorship really, really is. It's government force.
yeah.
Until you see
Or
government force, it can't be there.
Yeah, or if we kick some PLO monster from the chat, we usually don't because they're good for the algorithm, but we reserve the right to. And yeah, I mean, look, yeah, I might not like the policies of any of these platforms, as you mentioned. By the way, for people who are worried about any of our stuff getting removed, we have started uploading full episodes of the reality show to X. We might do the same with the Daily Objective at some point. If you see that, and a main part of that, the reason we do that is because I think there's more potential for it to go viral or at least catch on to some extent by people sharing it over YouTube, which I think as much, although I encourage people to share, as much as you share, it is mostly the algorithm that determines what does well and what doesn't. On X, yeah, if enough people share or if people with enough followers share, it will be viewed by many people, which is why I encourage you to follow the Ayn Rand Center UK on X and to share our stuff, specifically full episodes of the reality show. And another episode of the reality show is coming tomorrow. We will be talking, unless something else comes up, about Dave Smith and my little ex uh, disagreement with him, the way he chose to express himself, and the way his army that came after me chose to express themselves. Because I think there's enough in that kind of style of debate that is worthy of another Dave Smith episode. Although we've talked about him enough, this might be the last one. He's not as important as Candace, so I think three is a charm, if you want to call it that. Thank you, Jonathan, for the last minute super chat. James, parting thoughts for real now? All
Uh,
right.
be safe, please. It's
Thanks
dangerous
everybody for
world out there,
watching.
my friends.
Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Daily Objective and the reality show.